Hey everyone, my guest today is Daniel Bookman. Daniel is a lawyer in Israel, religious by conviction and rational by instinct. He approaches conflict, faith, and a divided society with a medical mindset. Let's understand the problems, make the diagnosis, prescribe solutions, and hopefully lower the temperature somewhat. Welcome to the show, Daniel. I was wondering if you could tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you're working on.
Um, okay, a little bit about myself, I guess. Why
Yeah.
not? I'm starting from now. I live in Jerusalem, Israel. I practice as a lawyer. I'm a religious Jew. I am part of the ultra-orthodox community in Israel, which you may or may have not heard about. I think a lot of events that occur in the world are actually, in some ways, related to the community themselves due to Israeli politics. Um, I wasn't born in Israel. I was born in Glasgow, Scotland, in the United Kingdom. I was educated in Manchester from the age of 12. My parents sent me there to get a religious education. After that, I studied in rabbinical college in Israel. I then took a law degree in England. I then got married, came back to Israel, studied another number of years in rabbinical colleges, various colleges for married people. I then qualified for the Israeli bar, took a professional qualification. I worked for a number of years. I then took a break from working in law, went into high tech, worked as a computer programmer for a number of years. I then returned to law, and since then I've been practicing law. I try to spend quite a bit of my time when I'm not practicing law studying the Jewish holy works, the various literature, which is viewed as a great religious obligation, moral obligation
Mhm.
to study to study the Jewish works and texts. And I also look at the world a little bit and think about it and try to bring. We spend a lot of time analyzing when we're studying, trying to develop a logical thinking to a large
Mhm.
extent. That's one of my arguments in the book of the presentation of the rational elements in religion. So I find myself contemplating the world, and when we have, especially in a place as volatile as Israel, when we have traumatic events, I try to look at them, analyze them, and try to problem solve to a certain extent. I think
Yeah.
that's where I come here.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
as I yeah, sorry,
it's an interesting background. That's
yeah,
and
it's a bit
took some
different.
work. I was,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah.
I have ancestors from Scotland, so
Yeah.
yeah.
From Glasgow.
Huh. I don't. I know they came from the Cawdor Castle. And my
Uh,
mom and brother and sister went there and visited.
Nice.
And it looks beautiful. But
Um, I hear. And when did they go to
yeah,
America?
um, we generations ago. It's yeah,
Probably,
yeah. So
yeah.
I've never been,
Right.
but
Okay. No, it's a very beautiful place. I haven't been there for quite a while.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And yeah. Ironically, there is a strong anti-Israel element in Scottish politics.
Oh,
Ironically,
really?
yeah, which is of concern.
Yeah,
It's been quite a while. I don't know. Maybe there are reasons for that, but that's. I don't know if it affects everyday life, but in politics, they're quite vocal. There's quite a
yeah,
strong anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, which I'm not against
yeah,
pro-Palestinian, but it acquires an anti-Israel bias. Even
yeah. It
before the
is.
October the 7th, that was quite marked and
Yeah.
prevalent.
Okay, so this leads perfectly into your first book. Um, it, the first chapter I see is called Israel Under Attack,
Ah,
and
right, the second book. Okay, yeah, okay,
oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry, your second book.
Chronologically, it's the
Um,
second book. It may be in the list I gave you. Yeah, chronologically, yes.
it's
Because which is
uh
written recently in response to essentially to the strong wave of anti-Semitism that has
yeah.
been felt since October the 7th. That's what motivated me to write that book.
Okay.
Right. So yes, the first book, the first chapter, yeah, is Israel's response.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, can you talk to us a little bit about
what that book is about, and, I guess, here in America, we only see what's in the headlines. So, could you give us a bit of an insider view on what things are like since October 7th?
Okay, that's two different questions. One is
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. One is what the book is about, and one is what life
Mhm,
is about. So I'll start the easier. What's life about here? Um, life is a concern. It's even
mhm,
life is always drama and always action and always worry. Prior to October the 7th, in some ways the situation was worse, or it was very dramatic, traumatic. There was a lot of tension in Israeli society over politics. That if you're aware, like 3 years ago, I think it was, there was a general election, and
mhm,
the Israeli right, the Likud under Netanyahu, were successful in the elections, and they actually scored what was the greatest electoral success they'd had. Netanyahu's been in power for over 10 years. There's been a number
mhm,
of elections. This was considered the most successful. He obtained an absolute majority, which allowed him to form a coalition of all parties aligned with his worldview. The religious parties, the national religious, everyone on the right side of the political aisle, including the ultra-orthodox parties, which I'm more aligned with.
mhm,
And that was considered, because there'd been a lot of tension in Israel between left and right, religious and anti-religious. There'd been the problem. I have to like backtrack a little bit. There's a problem with, for example, the drafting of the religious, the ultra orthodox, into the army. That's been quite a contentious issue, as well as
mhm,
other religious issues, religion in society. And the feeling was that the legal system had been preventing legislation to try and sort these issues out. That there had been a majority, a conservative majority, that were trying to pass religiously or conservative type legislation that would
mhm,
protect religious rights, that would try and regulate the issues of the ultra orthodox serving the army, things like that. And the High Court had, on a number of occasions, had declared these measures illegal, unlawful. Was it like quite a high level of judicial intervention and activism? So the hope was that
mhm,
there would be now enough political support, enough political power to enact laws that would finally limit, first of all, the courts from interfering, and limit all those other forces, the executive, the legal advisors, from preventing conservative type legislation from being passed. That was the hope.
okay.
Therefore, there was a bit of euphoria after that election. Here we've got this this overall majority. We can now
Yeah.
start real legislation, really getting things in order. The problem was that caused, on the other side of the political aisle, a trauma, which moved from a trauma to a very powerful anti-government movement with mass demonstrations and mass
Mhm,
strikes and threats from multiple sectors of of insurrection, not to serve in the army, to undermine many of the institutions, the very foundations of the running of the state, were in
mhm,
danger. And that was, I think, the precursor to October the 7th. I think October the 7th in some ways saved the country from descending into civil war. The
okay.
7th of October, from then after 7th of
Yeah.
October, the country sort of came together to a greater extent. There was no talk of
Mhm,
insurrection and of mutiny, etc., which had been. So that was a
yeah.
pre-October 7th drama. The post-October 7th drama has also been, not just drama, it's trauma, terrible terrorist attack, and
Yeah.
what the country has done to respond, which has caused a lot of, international and national, I don't know what's the best word. It's been a lot of tensions
Mhm,
um, in society. There was also a lot. There was a renewal of the demonstrations. It was all about releasing the hostages, trying to finish the war and to
yeah.
release the hostages. And I've written about that in the book a little bit. What was maybe appropriate, what was not. So basically, Israel has been a war, a sort of passive war or active war for the last 2 years. It's finally coming to an end. To a certain extent, the hostages have been released. The war, there's been an official ceasefire, trying to work things out. No one's quite sure politically or geopolitically where things are actually going to go. Trump is a very common word in the Israeli vocabulary these days.
You're right.
Yeah, Trump and Netanyahu, they sort of dominate the conversation and headlines and politics to a large extent, although the religious issues are also quite prevalent. That's on a political level. That's what's going on in society.
Yeah.
There's obviously, in 2 minutes, I guess that's so my book, coming, I guess, to your second question.
Okay.
My book was a response. I was looking last couple of years with alarm at what's going on internationally. Whatever your view is, whether you like what Israel's doing or not, whether Israel had a choice, did not have a choice, but there was certainly a tremendous upsurge in anti-Semitism throughout the world, some of which is reported and much of which is not even reported.
Yeah.
And Jews were feeling increasingly unsafe. And I was starting to hear as well the debates, the discussions, the accusations, which were becoming emotive and very vocal, and we're not focusing a lot on rationality, on logic, just bashing Israel, which can become dangerous. It's like the mob. You could feel the mob, and you could feel there was an intense dislike, a hatred of Israel that was developing. So I started thinking about what was the argumentations that were being advanced for and against, and trying to understand on a deep what's really going on. Why are we pro? Why are people who are pro? What are we against? What's actually the issue? They weren't being articulated so clearly. So this brought me to, I sort of integrated this with my everyday sort of life, which is trying to understand in a deep, rational way what's going on. So I started formulating thoughts that started. The first chapter, like you're saying, was explaining the Israeli position from a more, hopefully, profound perspective. And that led into a conceptual discussion of many other things in society as a whole, not just in Israel, but throughout the Western world: geopolitics, ethics, anti-Semitism, democracy. And I ended up trying to suggest solutions. I don't know if I have the right to do that, but that's what that's what the book does. The last point is, it was actually written in two time frames. 9 chapters out of 10 were written like I just described. The final chapter of the book is actually a proposal for a new model of democracy. I argue that the part of the division in society is due to democracy itself. That was written pre-October the 7th, when Israel itself was descending into chaos and anarchy and mutiny and rebellion, civil insurrection. And I said, what's going on? This is democracy. I was like perplexed. I have two heads, so to speak. I have a religious approach to things, which is this is God's will and we have to improve ourselves. That's how we view it. And this is not so much relative to us, applicable to us. Our job is to be good Jews, to be good people, to be as good as we can. We can't really affect what's going on in society. But I also have my rational, for whatever reason, some would say, why are you getting involved? I do get involved intellectually. Why is this happening? I'm questioning democracy. Why is this happening? There's been a democratic election. One side has been successful. They have an agenda. Let's get on with it. Why does it have to be this war? The country plunged into civil war over this. You will have the other chance. The left will have their chance in 4 years' time. That's the basics of democracy. So it got me thinking about it. On the basis of that, I offered my analysis to what democracy has got to do with it, and maybe even our current model, Western model in general, of democracy is perhaps responsible for a lot of this division, which was seen in Israel, particularly in acute form, but also exists very much in America, as I'm sure you're aware.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's,
yes. While you were talking, it basically, you're describing what's going on in America right now too. And it's I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I had it very much in mind. Yeah. And I was trying to understand that. And with a certain degree of alarm, I look, politics is becoming so toxic, so divisive. It's endangering America itself. And everything is about politics. There's no rational discussion between the parties. There's no collaboration. Everything is just to get points. So
Yeah.
I was trying to understand why that is, and to suggest I've proposed a diagnosis for what's going on, and offered a solution.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's, I a little bit off topic, but I've noticed that so many people are living too much of their lives based off of politics and what influencers are saying.
yeah,
And I I guess I personally have limited my time online to only be podcast related for the most part, or posting on my personal
right,
page, posting pretty pictures. I'm not going to get into arguments or um, follow the accounts that are kind of rage baiting, but
yeah, yeah.
I people make money off of making people upset about stuff. So
Yeah. It's a
it's
culture that's not doesn't seem to be designed to improve people's life or the lives of society,
mhm,
and people are
yeah,
willing to sow division for the sake
yeah,
of their own prominence and what that brings, and that's sad. That's a culture of the internet. And you were saying that you limit your exposure to the internet. That's very much in
mhm,
line with the orthodox, ultra-orthodox
yeah,
religious approach to technology in general. It's generally frowned upon, and exposure to the internet in general is very, very limited, only for
mhm,
specific. It's not really allowed so much in our community at all, and for good reason.
yeah,
I think, like you were describing. But
yeah,
you're describing the toxic atmosphere that surrounds politics,
mhm,
and the reason why I think there are so much so much argumentation and strife and toxicity in these discussions, and why influencers are able to leverage so much emotion, is because there must be something there that grabs people, that affects
yeah,
people profoundly, and that's part of my analysis of what politics is about, why it is. The book, I've called it Beyond Power, and
mhm,
it, I suggest that that's my understanding, that it's a lot to do with power, and
yeah,
power is what motivates people very profoundly. Impotence and power and not having power. That's
mhm,
why it's able to grab people. And I also think that's part of anti-Semitism, is indirectly very much related to that.
yeah.
I don't know if you want to get into discussion of that or whatever.
Yeah, can you there's only like one very specific question I want to ask when we get there naturally, but I would like to discuss the rise of anti-Semitism, because we're seeing that here in America, and
Hmm.
it seems like there's different reasons for it, and different groups of people that um like some people are upset that Israel has too much control. Others are mostly just, well, we're supposed to be America first, not Israel first. But like
Right,
that doesn't, w-
right.
you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
So yeah, if you want to, I'd
right.
like to go into that a bit if you'd like to.
Yeah, there's a few elements to that. So first of all, you're alluding to, yes, the argument that is very commonly made, that America seems to be too involved in Israel, and too and the argument, the case is made that the Jewish lobby in America is is um, is influencing American policy, perhaps
Mhm.
against the interests of America itself. And I've dedicated a chapter to that. I've called it "Responding to Candace Owens." She was one of the first ones to
Yeah,
clearly articulate the
yeah,
isolationist, sort of, it's called, approach, that America would do better to extricate itself from Israel, from supporting Israel, from the Middle East, and maybe that would make
mhm,
America a far more safe and prosperous place, without so much being invested, and so much paying such they do pay a price in terms of
mhm,
security, in terms of diplomacy, maybe in terms of economics, and
yeah,
in terms of focus. There's a lot of focus on that. So that definitely is a point. Um, I I respond to that, first of all, whenever I hear the argument made, the case made, the accusation leveled, that the Jewish lobby in America is far too powerful, and Trump is in Netanyahu's pocket, and all
yeah,
sorts of, like, that's a caricature, but
mhm,
it's presented in it represents a lot. There's a deep resentment, one could say, of
yeah,
that. And my response, first of all, to that is, it's not that there's a Jewish lobby. That's not why. That's the Jewish lobby would not be effective if there wasn't a very deep sentiment, pro-Israel sentiment, that is very deeply embedded in American society as a whole. And yes, the Jewish lobby maybe is quite effective. You can argue how effective is it, but it's only effective in rallying and leveraging the sentiment, the deep sentiment that lies there, the deep sentiment and affinity that America has for Israel, at least once it was completely across the board in American political society. And that's becoming a little bit more divided between left and right. But nevertheless, there is a deep sentiment felt, and therefore I argue it's not the Jewish lobby; it's the American people themselves have a close affinity for Israel, and therefore argue. Maybe one has to understand why that is. Is it just a sentimental? Is it biblical? Is it religious? What is it? And I make the case. I argue the case against, like, if it's just based on sentiment or religious grounds, is that a justification for America to be so involved in Israel and to give so much credit to Israel and so much aid to Israel? Would that justify it? And I look for a deeper substantive pro-American argument. And there are basic pro-American arguments that are made why it is in America's interest to be pro-Israel. Arguments like the security collaboration gives America greater, the Israeli intelligence, etc. The counter argument to that would be, on the contrary, it's the collaboration that renders America more vulnerable security-wise. They become a target for extremist Muslim or Middle East terrorism because of the support for Israel. So that sort of negates that argument. Other arguments are economic or technological. There's a lot of technological development, which definitely is true. But is that sufficient justification? So the real justification, in my opinion, comes from a deeper understanding of geopolitics itself. It's a geopolitical. There's a deeper. We can go into antisemitism. There's two different things. Antisemitism, they're all founded on similar concepts. So maybe we can talk first about geopolitics if you want.
Sure.
And then we can get to antisemitism. Or do you want me to start? Where do you want to start? It's up to you. I'm talking too much here. I want to hear.
Oh, you're fine. So I guess I'd like to start with geopolitics. With Trump's second term here, he has been really involved on the geopolitical side, and I think a lot of people don't quite. The problem here in America is that everyone's into politics now. Everyone's putting in having an opinion. A lot of people don't understand what the information they're consuming. So, and I think with the geopolitical side, a lot of people don't understand very much. I'm not trying to call people stupid, but it takes an understanding. This isn't something that you can just,
because it's hard to understand, because there are so many geopolitical epicenters and events and episodes that are occurring, and do they necessarily is there a correlation between them? I've looked for an underlying logic, and I'm going to propose there is an underlying logic that can make sense of it, and maybe that would be useful. I would hope, and it would explain Israel as well. I'm offering really a new understanding for the Middle East itself based on that. So I guess I'm going to start then with geopolitics. So let's take the conflict in the Ukraine. Let's start with that and try to understand it, maybe. And I started with a basic question. Why did Vladimir Putin and Russia, why did they take such a, seemingly out of the blue, such a dramatic step of initiating war, a full-out war almost of annihilation, attrition and attempted annihilation of a neighbor that ostensibly was in no way a threat militarily to them? That's a very perplexing question, which I don't know if it's people think about it enough. It's almost like assumed, yes, they were a threat and that's it, and now they've gone to war and let's just deal with the war. I want to understand why. There must be some deep-seated reason why Russia thought it was necessary to go to war There's
Mhm.
never been a war in Europe for like a real war since Bosnia, whatever, and Yugoslavia. But a real war between East and West for 60, 70 years, fortunately, since there were, or even before that, there was never a war. It was a Cold War. There was never an active war. Suddenly we're actually in a war. Real life,
Yeah.
modern day, 21st century war. Why is that?
Yeah.
Do you have I'm asking you, maybe I shouldn't.
I
Am I allowed to ask the interviewer?
well,
Do you have an
the
opinion?
theory
Why is that happening? Yeah. What's
the theory here is that he is that we had a weak president, Biden, and that
uh-huh.
he saw an opportunity to get away with grabbing more territory. I'm not saying that's correct, but that's
In other words, it
yeah.
was like it was colonialism almost. You're saying Russia
Mhm.
wants to expand its colonial interests, maybe its economic interests.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah, basically. And then also isn't there he believes he has the right to some of this territory as well?
yeah, there is some historical claim, and the Russian people and
Yeah.
the Ukrainian people are close related. Maybe it was once part of the original Russian Confederate. But
Mhm.
nevertheless, are these reasons good enough to go to war? I mean, I don't think Russia has gained economically, particularly from this war, and I think it was maybe quite predictable. You can't just
Mhm.
take over a country and not pay a huge price.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm using this as a model to explain what I think is a fairly simple geopolitical reality dynamic that
Mhm.
underlies everything, and it's based on democracy. That in the West we have democracy.
Mhm.
Democracy is the rule of the people. And I draw a distinction. I don't know if I'll get into a conceptual distinction, but there's two types of societies. There's a society that
Yeah.
rules itself, that's democracy, and the
Yeah.
society that does not rule itself, that's ruled by others. That's authoritarian socialism or dictatorship, whichever, communism, whichever form. But they're not democracy. There's democracy and there's controlled, a country being controlled by the people, controlling itself, its own destiny politically, or a country being
Uh-huh.
controlled by a regime or a dictator. And that is the fundamental mover, I think, in geopolitics. Because
Yeah.
I argue when you have a dictatorship confers an incredible amount of power on those that are privileged to be in the ruling regime. They control the whole country. They control everything.
Mhm.
What for them, and power corrupts because, why does power corrupt? Because the lure of power is so incredibly powerful. Nobody who has power is willing generally to relinquish it, and absolute power corrupts absolutely, because absolute power you're never
Uh-huh.
going to relinquish. And dictators and people in power
Yeah.
historically, and it's a basic facet of human nature, however much power they have, they're going to be obsessed with securing that power, maintaining that power,
Yeah.
and responding to any perceived threats to that power. That's the basic
Mhm.
dynamic, I think, the mindset of a dictator and the ruling regime.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
have a dictatorship neighboring with a democracy,
Mhm.
particularly where there's an affinity, a cultural and a racial affinity, linguistic, between the two countries, they're closely affiliated, and the democracy, by virtue of being a democracy, is successful culturally,
Mhm.
economically, diplomatically. So what's that going to engender? What's going to happen? The result of that is going to
Yeah.
be that the neighboring country, the population, are going to start looking themselves to that democracy and saying, hey, these guys have got rights. These guys have got freedom of speech, freedom of thought,
Mhm.
freedom of business, freedom of commerce, everything. And they're being successful. And they appear to be having a great life, an improved life. And they're going to start to entertain thoughts themselves. Why can't we have
Yeah.
that? Maybe we should entertain that.
Yeah.
And what's
Yeah.
what's the response going to be that? What is that? That is a tremendous threat. That is like the
Mhm.
greatest threat for the ruling regime of a dictatorship.
Yeah.
The aspirations of the populace for political freedom and independence, because that basically is an existential threat to their ruling, to their power, to their privilege, to everything they have. That,
Yeah.
I think, is why Putin felt that was what motivated, that's the fundamental motivation for him seeing and framing Ukraine as a threat. It's not a threat really to
Yeah.
Russia. He framed it in one of his speeches. He spoke about how it's a threat to the Russian people. I don't think it's a threat to the Russian people. I think it's an opportunity almost for the Russian people. It's a threat to the
Mhm.
ruling regime. And that was why he felt that threatened existentially his rule and that of the
Yeah.
ruling regime felt so threatened. And therefore, to the extent that they were prepared to engage in war. That's the first geopolitical example. The other one, which I think we can't go into too many, but I think is Taiwan.
Okay.
Let's look at Taiwan.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of tension existing between China and Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
China claims that Taiwan is part of the Chinese Republic
Yeah.
from historically, etc., and therefore it's ours. It's a very undemocratic claim, but that's what they claim, and they're very prepared to take affirmative action to enforce that. There's all sorts of military maneuvering and plans, and it's very clear if they would have the opportunity, they would take Taiwan by force. No
Mm-hmm.
question about it. Similar to the Chinese takeover of Hong Kong. They maneuvered very determinedly to secure Hong Kong from the British and to limit the Hong Kong democratic freedom. So again, why is that? Why is China obsessed with Taiwan? And America is only the American defense, the robust American defense of Taiwan that has prevented it till now.
Yeah. They
So why is that again? So why is that? Why is China obsessed with Taiwan? And the answer, I think, again, is because China is very much based on it's a communist or socialist regime, where there's a lot of power concentrated with the ruling regime. And for them, Taiwan, an independent, democratic, successful nation, is a threat to the whole Chinese, not an empire, the whole Chinese republic, whatever.
Right.
If they are allowed to achieve independence, that's going to give the Chinese, like they had in Tiananmen Square. The Chinese do obviously entertain thoughts of independence, and therefore Taiwan is a threat. Is very much a threat to the ruling regime. And that, I think, explains why. That is why the Chinese obsession with Taiwan.
Yeah. That makes complete sense.
Right. So that, in my understanding, is the fundamental force and the motivation that explains the basics of these geopolitical conflicts and tensions.
Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to tell you about my sponsors real quick. Are you looking for a gift for a music lover, or maybe some apparel to show off your quirky side? Old Glory has you covered. With over 300,000 officially licensed items covering music, sports, entertainment, and pop culture, you're guaranteed to find the perfect item. They even have seasonal gear. My husband enjoys the Beatles and Led Zeppelin apparel, and I love the Billy Idol apparel. I even found items for my fellow plant enthusiasts. This family-owned superstore is known for their quality and customer service, offers free standard shipping on all orders, and orders are shipped the same day you purchase. My discount code gives you 15% off your entire order, and it's currently the best deal available. Just visit oldglory.com and enter in my promo code JADE, that's JADE, at checkout. Looking for a game-changing way to improve your health? Zevo Life is the world's most nutrient-dense whole plant, packed with over 50% plant protein, essential amino acids, fiber, and antioxidants. Harnessing the best nature has to offer, Zevo Life nourishes your body while driving your performance, vitality, and overall well-being. Each serving is a concentrated source of clean, well-balanced nutrition designed to support modern lifestyles, and just 1 teaspoon a day supports your gut, boosts energy, and promotes healthier skin and hair. It's no wonder that it's receiving rave 5-star reviews. Step into a healthier future with a 30% discount and a 30-day risk-free guarantee by visiting zivo.life and using my promo code. To support my show and to receive 30% off your entire order, enter in my promo code JADE, that's JADE, at checkout. I was also thinking about, I was talking to someone from Iran that was part of the resistance, and she was explaining that, and it's more of a broader pattern too. Anytime there's someone new entering into the dictatorship, it seems like they're fine, seems like they want to make changes, but the longer they're in and the more power they get, the less they care about the people that they're supposed to be
because they're more concerned with their own power. Absolutely. Where are you seeing that in Iran? You mean every time there's a new president, prime minister, he sort of talks about reform, and there is hope of reform. Ultimately, it doesn't proceed anywhere. Yeah, because
Yeah.
the ruling regime is concerned with power. Whether that individual themselves perhaps would be willing to grant more power, but those around them are also threatened.
Yep.
The ruling regime, and therefore they won't allow it to occur. And yes,
Yeah.
that's very much what's happening in Iran. And that's my take. In actual fact,
Uh-huh.
I'm offering a very simplistic take on a geopolitical conflict that baffles the world, it baffles me, baffles everyone. The Middle East. Why is the Middle East so obsessed with Israel?
Yeah.
Why? What is this obsession? Is it purely a self-determination issue for the Palestinians, or is it more than that? So if I've argued, in actual fact, that we take this geopolitical principle that I'm trying to argue, that actually explains maybe what's going on in the Middle East. Because for hundreds or even thousands of years, the Middle East has been run to whatever extent. There were countries, but whatever the society itself was never a democratic society. Democracy has only been in Europe for like 500 years. The Middle East has been based on ruling regimes and the ruler, the king, the emperor, whatever he is, exercising full control over the citizenship. So this is my theory, when Israel came along and planted itself in the Middle East, it was very much importing democratic ideals. It was setting itself up as a democratic outpost. I'm going to argue that the Jewish state is really the source of democracy itself. I argue somewhere else. That's why it's a particularly acute threat. So I argue that's why that's really the alarm that the countries in the Middle East felt towards Israel, because they're not democracies. And they saw Israel developing and thriving and functioning as a democracy, even pre-1948, before it became officially a state. But it was very much operating on democratic ideals. And that, I think, was the real threat. That was what really, my understanding, was what powerfully motivated and threatened the regime, the ruling regime, not the people themselves. Initially, the Palestinian indigenous population, from my understanding, my reading of history, were very welcoming to the Jewish settlers who came in the 19th, 20th century. They were building the country up. It was for everyone's benefit. But when the ruling regime started realizing that this is actually a threat to their rule, they're empowering the population, empowering the people to seek a better life, to seek a more independent life. It's affecting the power structures themselves. That was when the extreme opposition to the Zionist movement crystallized around that theme. That, in my opinion, is what has really been responsible for perpetuating the conflict. It's the threat to power of all the regimes. And if you look at it, there's a correlation even between the degree of opposition to Israel and the degree of freedom and democracy in that particular regime. The most extreme example being, like as you mentioned, Iran. Iran is probably the most repressive of all the regimes, and it's the most hostile towards Israel. Close second are maybe Lebanon and Syria. Libya further away, but of the immediate neighbors, Lebanon and Syria, which are also more repressive regimes and were more implacably anti-Israel. You have in the middle countries like Egypt, which has become more democratic. You have the United Arab Emirates, which is more democratic or is more benign as a dictatorship. It wants the best for its people. These are less threatened by Israel, and therefore they're able to come to political accommodation with Israel. That's my understanding of the Middle East, which is quite innovative. I think it's a new understanding to a certain extent. But now coming back to America.
Yeah.
So I'm arguing very like a deep argument here. I'm suggesting what would happen if there be no Israel? What would happen if Israel? I present the theoretical scenario. Let's say America would the aspirations and the dreams and the fantasies of the anti-Israel camp would be realized, and America would say, "Yeah, we're now no longer invested in Israel. We're withdrawing political support. We're withdrawing economic support. We're withdrawing diplomatic support." What would happen to Israel? What would happen at all in the world? And Israel, in all likelihood, I think, would be severely challenged, I don't think it would be able to really endure for particularly long. It would embolden the enemies of Israel, would gradually, even those who are perhaps positively predisposed towards Israel currently, but I think there would be a turn against Israel, and Israel would be, I don't want to even say it, but it might end up in war and be annihilated. And where would that leave the world? Where would that leave the world? It would leave where would that leave the Middle East? Where would the Middle East be without Israel?
It wouldn't be better off, that's for sure.
It would probably I project, my argument is it would descend into it would once again revert to the dictatorship type of regime, which the populace would be suppressed, and there'd be just repressive regimes. And what would the implication be then for America? So this, I'm coming back now, backing up to geopolitics. In geopolitics, it's seen as America against Russia, America against Iran, and America against China. That's the three major geopolitical fronts America is faced with. And if you think about them, they're all very much, why is that? Why is geopolitically, has America facing all these this sort of Cold War? Why are they challenged by these nations? And I'm arguing it's the same geopolitical dynamic, because America as a democracy is a threat to China. It's a threat to Russia. It's a threat to Iran, where America itself means no harm. America has no aspirations to attack China or to do anything to China. It's a democratically, why? They just want to thrive and be prosperous, nothing else. Yet China views America, I think it's China is the one that, and Russia and Iran view America to a certain extent as an enemy. They're responsible for the tensions. That's what I'm arguing. Because America is a threat as a democracy. And therefore, they have to frame the relationship with America as one of an enemy. And therefore, extrapolating from that, I'm saying if the Middle East would be left without Israel to its own devices, it would probably deteriorate into dictatorships. Iran would acquire far more influence. And the implications would be for America, that America then would be the great Satan again, would be the threat. There wouldn't be the fantasy of this close relationship and cooperation between America and the Middle East. I don't think that would happen. I think that the Middle East would be forced through Iran and the other more extreme regimes into a position of where they're all dictatorships, who would therefore naturally align one with another, with Iran, with China, with Russia, against America. So America would find itself, in actual fact, isolated in a world that would be extremely antithetical towards America. Would view America as a threat. Therefore, America's geopolitical and long-term geopolitical standing would be far more prejudiced without Israel. So therefore, my argument is I think people implicitly understand, but as part of the deep sentiment, I'm coming back now, the deep sentiment of affinity for Israel is maybe based on this deep understanding. Without Israel, the world will become a far more dangerous place for America.
And I don't think a lot of people.
Too much again.
No, you're fine. I don't think a lot of people see it as that way. And it is kind of right in front of your face. There's China and Taiwan, Russia and Ukraine, and I just don't think people understand the concept. We need to be sticking up for those that are allies and those with democracies. And
I'm arguing it's in America's interest to support democracy. It's not just an ethical even or an emotional issue. It's a geopolitical strategic interest, I think, to support democracy, because without democracy, a country that's non-democratic is going to view America as an enemy, as a threat. That is why I think America does support democracy. It's on that. I think it's predicated on that understanding that it needs to, to support democracy for its own standing, to make the world safer for democracy.
It's I've also been kind of thinking about all the pro-Palestine protesters here in America, and I just don't understand how. Well, I do. This is gonna. edge
Whatever
into
you want.
conspiracy theory land,
Yeah.
but we're finding proof that people are paying protesters to believe
Right.
a certain to
Yeah.
represent that they feel a certain way.
Right.
I think that's been pretty evident in the pro-Palestine movement,
Right.
and it's not to say that people can't care for people on both sides, and
Mhm.
I think that's important to care about the people involved,
Yeah.
that are suffering because of
Definitely.
their
Definitely.
governments.
Definitely. But
But
it doesn't produce solutions.
no,
Attacking
and
Israel doesn't produce solutions.
no, and I can tell you, if you a lot of these protesters, if you were to ask them if they understand anything about what's going on, most of them don't. They're just there because
Right.
they're following
Yeah.
others that
We've seen a lot of
have been paid
disturbing
to.
images in the media, no question about it, and they are
Yeah,
disturbing. Yeah, and they're
yeah,
correct.
but I don't think that they're understanding any
Right.
of it, because
Yeah, the
there's
content.
money
Why?
behind it. You get people outraged, and
Right. Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
just mad, and that's all they
Yeah.
know, is that they're mad,
Right.
you
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
it seems to be associated with what's called the progressive
mhm.
radical left movement. Is that? Would you agree with that?
Yes. Yep.
So and they're
Yes.
so I've tried to understand that. Why are they? Because they, if there is a lot of finance going into it, but they obviously are finding fertile ground. There is
Mhm.
a latent certain
Yeah.
anti-Israel, and it seems to go anti-Israel seems to go together with anti-America, anti-patriotism.
Yeah. Yes. I used to vote Democrat. I used to be on the left, and I lived in a very liberal city, and I realized that if you go against the grain at
Hmm.
all,
Yeah, yeah,
you're a bad
mm,
person,
yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever. And
yeah.
it's like,
You're alienated.
oh, so
Yeah,
we can't
yeah. You
think
don't. Yeah,
independently.
they don't
And
seem
I see
to.
that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, and I see that the right is kind of starting to do that a little bit in
Yes.
America here now too. But um,
That's partly because
so
politics has taken hold of it, and everything is about
mhm,
the struggle for power.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
unfortunately inhibit, yeah, everything. You have to identify. Political identification is everything,
yeah,
because power is so all-consuming, and this is really
yes,
what I'm saying. Geopolitically, power seems
yes,
m- to be like motivating everything,
hmm,
and that's internationally and also internally. It's about
yeah.
power. And that's I don't know if you want to talk about that, but that's what's behind it, I think.
That's that's the reoccurring theme of almost anyone I talk to, from any side, from any country, any angle. It's
What?
I mean, everyone can recognize that power is the driving force to
Right.
all the division,
Okay.
basically everything. But
Right.
what do we do about it?
Okay, so that's chapter 10.
Yeah, well, let's go into it.
Okay, I argue that it seems to me we're very divided in society.
Uh-huh.
Maybe I'm going to articulate what you're saying. You're saying
Mhm.
it seems to be about power, because I looked at Israel, I looked at America, I looked at Europe, I looked at democracy in general, and on the one hand, it seems to be extremely divided, and
Mhm.
passions are high and is toxic. On the other hand, if you look in society as a whole, look in the workplace and maybe in families and education, in culture, whatever it is, people seem to get
Yeah.
on. When they don't talk about certain topics, people get on, people collaborate, people are friendly, and
Mhm.
maybe they're not as divided as they would have us believe. There are many good friendships
Yeah.
between individuals on the right and the left, and collaborations in businesses, and they function perfectly well. They're all good people.
Mhm.
Which said to me, therefore, that maybe we're not actually divided, but it's politics that's dividing us. When it comes to politics, when we speak about politics, when we get involved in politics, then we become divided. The tensions rise. So it seems to me
Yeah.
that politics itself is what's dividing, meaning political power. So I don't think we're going to have time. I'm not going to waste too much time of everyone to get into a whole detailed. But basically, I've argued that it's political power. It's the struggle for political power that
Mhm.
is toxifying, that is causing this. And the reason, partly, I think the reason is because our democracy itself, our democratic model itself is encouraging this
Uh-huh.
to a certain extent. And like you're saying, what can we do? This is
Right.
democracy.
Yeah.
We can't.
Yeah.
So ideally, maybe the ideal form of rule is what we have in the religious community, where we have the great spiritual leaders, the great rabbis. They control everything. They're people who are ethically have no, they're ethically completely elevated and they have no interest. That maybe is what would work best for society as a whole. But it's obviously not going to be. In the end, it has to be democracy. It has to be elected leaders. No one's going to agree who the spiritual leader should be. So the democratic model itself, I think, is perhaps responsible. And I'm arguing it's actually not completely democratic. If you think about it. Because what do elections determine? The determination of an election generally is it going to be Trump or is it going to be Harris or Netanyahu?
Right.
It's a binary question, and it's whoever gains essentially 51% of the vote is the successor, is the victor, is the political victor. And how much power do they get for that 51% of the vote?
All of it.
100%.
Yeah.
51% of the population, the representatives of the population, control 100% of the power.
Mm-hmm.
That, you could argue, is undemocratic to a certain extent.
Right.
It's not fair that the 49% are thereby forced to submit themselves to the rule of the majority, the 51% majority, and those few politicians who actually have acquired that power. Therefore, democracy, in actual fact, confers almost absolute unlimited power to a certain extent. Therefore, if I redefine democracy, it's not truly democracy. I would say it's electing all-powerful leaders, electing monarchs. It's choosing who your all-powerful dictator is, almost. And that's why I think elections create so much tension, and so much is predicated on the elections, because the victor is going to have absolute power, and the one who's not in power is going to have to submit themselves to absolute rule of somebody else. Therefore, it's all about absolute power.
Yeah.
And that's the source of all division. That's why it's so emotive and so captivating. And therefore, the solution I've suggested, the solution is the democratic model itself. That there should be a model that's more representative. It's not actually offering 100% power to the 51% victor in the elections, but rather it's genuinely reflecting the wishes of the populace. The 49% also have their full 49% say in the political governing system. That's the principle. Very briefly, I spent a whole chapter articulating how I think that model might look like.
Yeah.
If you want to get into the technical detail, it might become boring. Everyone might fall asleep.
Well, so I mean, also with the way that we have it, it's basically the new president undoes as much as they can as the previous president, and it
because power becomes the end itself. Because everyone's so focused on power, we don't even have time to think about policy. Certainly not long-term policy. It's about the personality who's most likely to win the election. Everything becomes focused on power, but power becomes the end in itself. And therefore, yes, they will do it's about competition between the two powers. The other side is viewed as an enemy because they're a threat to my absolute power.
Right.
Therefore, and there's no possibility of collaboration.
Yeah. And, I mean, the previous president, they were elected. So some of the things they did, that's what the people wanted them to do.
Absolutely. At that time.
And that's, I think that contributes to how people feel with the elections and why it does divide people.
Disappointment and disillusionment with the political system.
Yeah.
So I'm arguing a system that would be more genuinely representative of the wishes of the people would foster far greater belief and confidence in the system itself, would limit corruption, would force politicians to focus on genuinely what's good for the people, because it wouldn't be a fight. The system I'm proposing, I haven't explained it yet, but would focus more on issues rather than power.
Yeah. Do you want to explain it? Or have readers buy the book?
But I'll try a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. You'll tell me when you get bored, or I'll see you falling asleep. Or whatever. No, because the first point I mentioned when I say this is it's a little bit more complicated than the current.
Yeah.
The voting system is more complicated, and that's
Okay.
presented as a potential objection. Nowadays we're spoiled. We have a binary determination: is it Trump or Harris? Very easy.
Mhm.
We just have to spend
Yeah.
1,000 hours watching all the various political drama, and then we'll decide.
Yeah.
Probably decided anyway
Yeah.
beforehand. And that's actually my argument. My argument is, if we're prepared to spend waste, I call it waste, it's wasted time, on watching political drama, it's just like watching any other Hollywood, wasting our time on the media. If we're prepared to
Yeah.
invest so much time in following all the drama, so let's spend 3 or 4 hours learning a new political system to change the life of the whole country. It would be worth it.
Right.
Therefore, it responds to the objection that my system is a bit more complicated. I'm saying I think it's definitely worth it, and it's not lost time. You'll spend less time wasted on politics anyway. So, okay, to give you a taste, the first element is what I call the pre-election. What do I call it? I have to remember. Pre-election disclosure. Pre-election disclosure, meaning there's no formal structured requirement for parties or candidates. In America, you only have 2 parties. In many regimes, you have multiple parties. There's no formal method by which they explain who they are. Like at the beginning of our interview, I give an informal sort of explanation of who I am. In politics, that's what it is. You give something general who I am and what I sort of believe in. Do I believe in trans rights? Do I believe in Israel? And that's basically sort of about do I believe in defense? It's quite vague. So I'm saying there should be more accountability and transparency when you're vying for something as important as power. And parties should be forced to make a structured pre-election disclosure of where they actually stand substantively on all the cardinal issues. Defense, education, expense, democracy, religion, whatever is important in society. And they should be able, there should be like 10 or 20 questions framed that quantify, that describe these issues. Are you pro this, pro that, against that, the abortion or whatever? And each party has to give a numerically graded answer to where we stand on that, from 0 to 10, or from 0 to 100, or from -10 to +10, whatever you want, however you decide to actually do it. And that forces parties to really quantify where and to explain to the public where they actually stand on the issues themselves. So it's becoming already less about people, it's about the issues themselves. And you might say, I can't give a number to how pro this or that I am. And right, it's not really scientific and mathematically susceptible of description, but that's in the interest of the system. I think it's far preferable than leaving things completely vague. Let's have an imperfect system that gives a number and people will know exactly where they stand. That's the first element. The second element is and one of the parameters, more than this, one of the parameters that parties have to express clearly where they stand is on the issue of collaboration and cooperation itself with other political parties. You have to tell us, the public, where do you stand on cooperation with the other parties? Are you pro cooperation or are you anti cooperation? Are you pro collaboration or not? And it can either be a general, can be a general I'm pro collaboration, or it can be even on a per party basis. I respond to each party. I would 1 to 10 cooperate with party A or not cooperate with them. And that I think because my understanding of the theory is that most people want cooperation. Most people are against the political infighting and division that exists. And therefore that will strongly motivate a party to present a pro cooperation agenda.
Yes. And I mean, a lot of people I think are more in the middle than what what you would think, but we get forced into these categories and pressured to not veer off the path of the right or the left.
So this system, you can have also more nuanced, people can present a more nuanced opinion on each matter. But also it's very much like you're saying, I believe, most people are on the political middle and are therefore very in favor of cooperation. And therefore parties that present themselves as being pro cooperation will, I think, be successful. And that should motivate everyone to think twice. Are we going to be against or pro cooperation? And even whether or not you make it a legal requirement to live up to that, I think the political system itself will motivate. If you signal that we're pro cooperation, and then during the tenure when you're anti, you do everything to thwart cooperation, no one's going to trust you the next election round. So basically, there's a strong motivation to live up to what it is you're going to be professing, and you've quantifiably, very visibly stated where you stand on these issues, on the issue of cooperation. And therefore, that creates a lot of accountability, political accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be, I mean, we need that. We need some accountability in there.
Right. So,
almost like score sheets.
Yeah. So the final, I think, not the final, but maybe an important element I would just want to mention, already discussing, would be the actual political power, how political power is actually distributed. The parties when you vote for a party itself, like I said, would have to express where it stands on each issue. How much is it pro this? How much is it pro that? The election results, first of all, to be more, I would award for each person, instead of a binary vote, one vote for Biden, for Trump, you'd have 50 voting points, for example, which you'll be able to distribute between the parties as you choose, between each party, which gives you far greater control and say, and nuanced ability to express his preferences. The voting results would then be translated into giving each party a representation based on how many points they had gained from the electorate, based also on the factor of how they prioritized. So if you've prioritized education and you've got a high voter turnout in your party, you're going to get a high representation in the Ministry of Education, because you're only allowed to, for example, you have to express also your priorities for which office would you prioritize on. You can't say I'm for everything and I want everything. The party is going to have to express their own priorities. Where do we prioritize? And the election results are going to accord them power based on a graded power on how much vote they acquired and what their priorities were. So it will create, I'm saying it, I'm not going into too much detail, but it will create ultimately, I envisage, a system in which power is distributed very much according to the will of the people in a very finely resolutioned format. Each ministry will not be governed absolutely by one party. It will be it will be composed of representatives of each party, where their voting rights will be according to the percentages they've gained for this particular office. It's becoming a bit too technical now. And one more, Can I say one more requirement, because it's about cooperation. That each part, let's say, take the Ministry of Education or Defense. Each party will submit 4 candidates for that office. There will be a requirement for each party who's got any voting rights in this office to reach an agreement of how they're going to actually enact this mandate they've achieved, how they're going to actually collaborate together on this. They have to reach an agreement. If they don't reach an agreement, then they can't function. The individuals who are representing the party cannot occupy that office. Therefore, there'll be a strong incentive. Let's say the number 1 tires in each party try to get an agreement, they fail to, then it will fall to the number 2 representatives. If you can reach an agreement between all of you, you will be the ones in power managing this office, which creates a strong incentive for collaboration, to reach an agreement how we're going to run this together. Because if you don't reach an agreement, you're not going to be actually the individuals in power in this office.
I really like that. So, sometimes when we have elections, it's like, well, I really like this person, but if this person got it, I would also be happy. And you almost feel sad that you have multiple people that you like that didn't make it very far.
You're forced into binary choice.
Yes. And also what do you think about like just 2 parties or?
So I think so. Yeah, I mean, it's debatable based on economic monopolies. Is it good to have just a very limited amount, or is competition of multiple parties a good idea? So suggest, I argue, with the system I'm proposing, it would naturally evolve, I think, into multi-parties.
Uh-huh.
I think it would be forced to, because parties would be forced to define themselves ideologically and politically in a far more defined way. I think the current system, because power is everything, it allows people to be vague about the policies, and large parties can be like monolithic entities that hold multiple views.
Yeah.
That's why you have parties which are not really one party. There's many
Right.
nuances.
Yeah.
So I think it would result, and we can debate is that good or not, in smaller parties that are more ideologically coherent within themselves.
Mhm.
I think that would be the result. I think overall that would be healthy, because it will give
Yeah.
representation to everyone in a dynamic of cooperation that is fostering cooperation. I think it would be good.
Yes.
Everyone would feel represented. Like you said, you wouldn't have this disappointment. I wanted this guy, not this guy. You'll have everyone. You'll have a bit
Right.
of everyone.
Right. All right. I have one last question for you.
Sure.
Before at the end, I'll ask you if there's anything else you want the audience to know. But I have one last question for
I
you.
think I've spoken enough. I think I've spoken enough here.
So the Gaza peace deal, do
Yeah.
you think it's going to be successful? What are people thinking about that in Israel?
There's two different questions. Do I think it's going to be successful? What are
Yeah.
people thinking? I think obviously there's a huge amount of skepticism, maybe even cynicism,
Mhm.
Are Trump's plans realistic? There's an understanding something has to happen. To a certain extent, I don't know. You look at Gaza was radicalized, was quite radical
Mhm.
pre-October the 7th.
Mhm.
And the way I understand it is because of the political structure, because it was a dictatorship, it wasn't a democracy. Dictatorships radicalize because the ruling regime is forced to radicalize the population to maintain power. That was
Yeah.
the dynamic. So I argue the only real hope for Gaza is somehow obtaining democracy, somehow evolving towards our leadership that's more concerned with the will of the people, the good of the people, than obtaining power itself. So there are two cases in geopolitics, two notable cases in which dictatorships did evolve into democracy, and that's Germany and Japan post World War II. Yeah, the Nazis and Japan, who've both become outstandingly successful democracies, going from absolute dictatorships with an emperor and a Führer or whatever, who were warmongering and only wanted war, to becoming successful democracies. And tragically, the way that occurred was only through their absolute military defeat by the powers. When you have the absolute military defeat, it somehow provided the opportunity for the country to do a reset. So in response to your question, so maybe in Gaza, however tragic and it's terrible what's happened in Gaza, there's been a lot of suffering. Maybe there's been an absolute overturn, and maybe there's been the parallel to what happened in Germany and Japan that maybe allows a political real reset to Gaza, and maybe it will emerge, despite the culture, as a democracy. There's going to be a lot of the surrounding countries themselves that are not democratic are going to be threatened by this. So in some ways, they're motivated not to allow that to happen. Therefore, it's it's a very complex question. Can it happen?
Yeah. It does sound like there's other countries involved with it that maybe would help it be more successful.
I think Trump was very clever on that initiative. He's got his initiative. He's got 50 countries, each one contributing $1 billion for the rebuilding of Gaza. Whether you think maybe Israel should be paying the $50 billion, they knocked it out, maybe. But I think it's diplomatically very clever, because if you think about it, till now, Hamas didn't really think twice before they would take irresponsible actions that would result in destruction in Gaza. But now you've got the whole world basically invested very strongly in Gaza. I would think and hope that might itself cause the Gazan leadership to think that they're forced almost to cooperate. You've got 50 nations investing each $1 billion.
Yeah.
Can we really lightheartedly just allow this to take actions that are going to result in the likely destruction of all this?
Right.
So therefore, I think Trump has approached this. Whatever you think of Trump, I think that was whether that will work and whether it was going to contribute and is it really going to happen, I don't know. Historically, it hasn't worked till now. So I don't know. Maybe we're just going to carry on with the same back and forth. I don't know.
I hope it's successful.
Yeah. I mean, the world peace depends largely on this.
Mhm.
because Israel is such a powerful focus of world geopolitics, and so peace in the
Yeah.
Middle East is crucial for the world.
Yeah.
Religiously, maybe, like I say, God does maybe want us to have peace. Maybe we don't behave ourselves enough when there is too much prosperity.
Right.
So maybe we just have to always be on edge and on our toes. Maybe that's just better for us spiritually. I don't know.
I don't I wonder that sometimes too.
Yeah,
It's
I don't know if people want to hear that, but maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Is there anything else you'd like the audience to know?
No, I think I've said plenty. Probably said too much. There's other things we could talk about. We didn't get so much on the anti-Semitism. Maybe that would be another talk. But no, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity.
Of course. Yeah.
And I apologize if I've talked too much. I hope I made
No.
sense.
Yeah, don't apologize. I like when
No.
I
Okay.
I learned a lot from the conversation, which means my audience is learning a lot too through this, and
Hopefully.
that's
Okay.
what I like.
Yeah.
And you're welcome back anytime if there's
That's
more
very
you'd like to
kind.
talk about.
I think my main message is to try and inspire people to think for themselves, to think. Like you said, people look at things they don't understand. I also look at many things don't understand. Let's try and think before we act, before we opinion, before we attack. Just let's think, and that's the way forward, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Can you tell the audience where they could get your both of your books?
One of them they can't actually get. They'd have to come to my house because
I was wondering that.
haven't
Yeah.
actually published it yet.
Okay.
That's the one on religion and fundamentals and creation and all and morality. That is, I wrote it and I left it for whatever reason. The second one, which is what we discussed, politics and geopolitics and society and democracy, is available on Amazon. Can be purchased as a paperback or downloadable as for $3. It's only $3 to download it. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here today, and I will keep in touch with everything with the episode. So
okay, amazing.
All right.
Okay, thank you so much.
All
Have a
right.
great day.
Yep, you too. You too.